What's happening, YouTube? It's your homie S. Dot coming back to you with another video. And today, got a deck profile for you that I'm very excited to share with you guys. I just got my workout in, but immediately, as soon as I got home, I knew I wanted to do this deck profile because I've been so excited for a while to showcase this deck, and I've been working on it. And I think I got it to a pretty good place. I got my post-workout shake, I got my mind right, and we got this deck profile. Let's get it. All right, guys, so let's talk about Captain Omega Supreme here for a second. What drew me to this card was his effects, but before we get into that, starting from top to bottom, he is a leader in this mode. The three smaller characters, which we will get to in a second, are not leaders. So Matrix of Leadership, unfortunately, will not be able to be played in this deck. You could play it, but I mean, once you have it equipped, it's only going to give the +1 attack. Remember that the +1 and Pierce 1, well, he gets +1, but the additional +1 to each other character and the Pierce 1 to every other character only happens for every other character. So Matrix of Leadership wouldn't be a good card in this deck, but he still is a leader in this mode, and he's also ranged and melee. So it's cool that he has a double tag. I think this is the first and only card that we have in the game so far that has a double tag in one. We do have plenty of characters, like most Optimus Primes are melee in alt mode, their truck mode, and then ranged in their bot mode. We have like cards like the car Wheeljack from Wave 1. He is a specialist in alt mode and then melee in bot mode. The list goes on and on. But yeah, so that's really cool that he's able to be both tags. And the only card there's one card in here that's very relevant for both sides. I'm pretty sure you guys know what that card is, but we'll get to that when we get to the deck profile. But let's talk about his effect real quick. So first of all, he's a 7/33/3, so that's pretty respectable. And he also has Pierce 4. So no matter what, when he attacks, he's getting through for Pierce 4 unless your opponent has a stable cover or something to prevent Pierce damage. So 7 Pierce 4 immediately makes me think that, or draws me to being strong against blue decks. Of course, blue decks are always playing like the hidden fortifications, their sabotage armaments, the list goes on and on. Of course, they have their armors and stuff. So at worst, he's at least getting in for 4 damage, which is really nice. And then his secondary effect, which is really insane, is when he attacks, you may scrap 4 cards from your hand, scrap all the defender's upgrades, and then deal 1 damage to each enemy. So he is a disarm that destroys the cards instead of returning them back to the hand. And then he's also an armed hovercraft. So, of course, I'm a big advocate of the range package and all the direct damage, or any direct damage card in general. I love direct damage. My favorite aspect of this game thus far. But yeah, so that effect is very strong, and I'm very happy with how the character was designed. Overall, of course, one of the biggest thing you need to do is survive. Survival is the most important thing because you need to have your opponent deck out. Yes, that's right. Your opponent needs to deck out, and that's all I need to do in order to combine to this card. To this big guy. You don't have to discard any cards. You don't have to do anything like that. You just literally, your opponent needs to deck out, which could take a while depending, but there's some cards in here that'll help try to dictate, where their attacks go so they can mill more cards and, so they deck out faster. One other thing to really point out about this deck is that he is a combiner, of course, in this mode, and the other 3 characters, which actually we'll get into right now. The 3 characters here are all in alt mode, and then of course in Captain America, geez. Captain Omega Supreme's combiner mode, he is never a bot, which means he's never affected by marksmanship. So marksmanship, if your opponent's playing the range package, that's 3 deck cards they automatically have in their deck. There's not absolutely any point in the game where they can play marksmanship on these cards. It's different against aerial bots because aerial bots need to flip to their bot mode, which they're more susceptible to marksmanship. But this deck is completely immune to marksmanship, so that's a big plus for this deck and something to think about. And a card your opponent will definitely need to side out games 2 and 3. So let's start with the spaceship. The spaceship is really good. When he attacks, first of all, he's a 4/12/0. So when he attacks, you're able to scrap 2 cards from your hand and scrap an enemy upgrade. So it can be weapon, armor, utility. That's really nice. So you probably don't care about their armor as much, but getting rid of their weapons that can be threatening on your character's health, scrapping enemy pocket processors, energy packs off of Optimus Prime, Galaxy Commander. All those things are definitely very good. And he is one of the pieces that allow you to combine when your opponent decks out. Now, the reason why I mention that is because the base actually does not have the ability to combine. So right out the gate, like I said, the tank and the spaceship are the only 2 that let you combine. They have the text down below. When your opponent's reshuffling their deck, you're able to combine. So one way to surefire beat this deck is by trying to KO the tank and the spaceship before the base. You don't really want to attack it to the base anyway, because we'll get into his effect in a minute. But if you can KO these 2, then they can't combine whatsoever when you finally deck out, and that'll probably be the sure way to definitely win against this deck, because the base is not going to be able to take out how many ever bots, even with his really cool effect. Moving on to the next one, we have the Omega Supreme Tank. He is a 3/9/2, very respectable stats for a 7-drop in this type of deck anyway. He is able to, when he attacks, you can scrap 2 cards from your hand to deal 1 damage to the enemy. So he is a zap slash underhanded tactics slash whatever you want to call it. So dealing that 1 damage is really nice to be able to not have to waste an attack into said character, or if you have 2 useless cards in your hand, if you're trying to build up to play one of the powerful actions that I have in my deck we'll talk about here in a second, you can do that. Probably use his effect the least out of all of them. And then of course we have the Mega Supreme base. Now this is the most important one in terms of potentially getting your opponent's deck out faster. Keep in mind, when they flip the top 2 cards of their deck from this attack, they will not be able to get greens for his effect. What is his effect? His effect is when it defends, excuse me, it is not a he, well, I guess. When it defends, deal 2 damage to the attacker, and then flip, they must take the top 2 cards of the deck and scrap them. So again, they can't get greens off of those flips. So that's the name of the game. You're always going to most likely, if you go first, which you probably always should, whether you won the dice roll or not, you're hoping to go first and attack with the base. That way they immediately have to attack into him, and they, take 2 damage and build the top 2 cards of their deck. Top 2 cards isn't that big of a deal. It's still going to take a while for them to be able to, deck out, but it is what it is, and that's what we have to work with. One of the other things to talk about with this deck is, so we got the base who's 8 stars, the tank who's 7 stars, and the spaceship that's 7 stars. 7, 7, and 8 is 22, which means you are automatically obligated and able to play 3-star cards in your deck. There's 2 really good ones, one that I was main decking actually for a long while, until I finally just recently switched to the other one, and we'll again talk about that here in a second. But yeah, so that's another thing I really like about this deck, is because you're allowed to just play 3-star cards right out the gate. There's no figuring out bots and, okay, well I have this 10 and then this 7, and then okay, I got a 6 drop, so now I got 2-star cards I can play with. You're automatically obligated to have 22 stars to start with, and play 3-star cards. So I think that part is very cool as well. There is currently no 3-star bot in the game to be able to play with this to make it a 4-wide, and playing those 3-star cards will definitely be very valuable. So of course we're going to start out here with Security Checkpoint. This card is very powerful. Get rid of your opponent's upgrades. Very good against Jetfire. Depending on when you catch Jetfire with the Security Checkpoint, if they do not have another transformation action, meaning escape route or rollout, the fact that they have to, if they want to, they need to flip to his alt mode. If they didn't draw an upgrade for turn, I guess that's useful. When they flip to his alt mode, they won't be able to attack in the mode he really wants to be in, which is his bot mode. So no matter what, depending on when you catch them with Security Checkpoint, I like to hold this and, get a lot of my upgrades out of my hand and then play this card, which would be very nice. There's actually a little slight interaction with the fact that you can just kind of burn some of your upgrades to get rid of your opponent's upgrades if you know they have a big hand, especially like against the Springer control deck and Shockwave and Shockwave, Springer control deck, Jetfire, to name the most popular ones. But yeah, we'll get to that here in a second. So 3 Security Checkpoint, very powerful card. That double blue, of course, is very important and very valuable for keeping your guys with a decent amount of health when you're finally ready to combine. Next up, we have 3 the bigger they are. So your character levels or stars are 7, 7, and 8. So they're not going to be able to get in for the Pierce 4 on smaller characters like Flame War or the aerial bots or anything like that. But I mean, scaling up to hit most other characters, very important characters in this game currently, is that card is definitely always going to be good. Captain Omega Supreme himself is 22 stars, of course. So he'll be able to hit maybe Metroplex, which probably isn't a big deal. He'll be able to scale up and hit. Okay, it's probably not going to be that relevant, but I mean, there are some situations where it'll come up. Against other combiners like Superion, the Pierce 4 will matter there. So there you go. You play bigger they are on him. Now your Omega Supreme is a 9, Pierce 8. So getting in for 8 damage, really strong. And just a very good card overall. Next up, starting out the range package, we have 3 Marksmanship. Not too much to say about this card. Keep in mind again that this card is absolutely dead against aerial bot or against the Omega Supreme deck. This card is only be able to use when you have a ranged character. You have a ranged character always, usually, unless your tank and your spaceship are both KO'd. And then, of course, Omega Supreme himself is also ranged and melee. So you'll be able to use this card and be able to deal 2 damage to any enemy in bot mode. So a very good card. Next up, for our secret action package, I guess you could say the mainstays of any blue deck that I've been playing lately have always definitely 100% been 3 sabotage armaments and 2 to 3 hidden fortifications. But this deck with space, I'm able to actually fit these. These are one of the most important cards that I wanted to add to my deck. Being able to try to protect your guys and flip a lot of blues is what you want to do to deflect most of your opponent's attack. Now, this card is also always the main reason why I like this card is because it's a nice counter to Bashing Shield. Yes, Bashing Shield is still a green, but so are your armors in this deck and new cards like Sparring Gear. So it's like a war of, okay, I get my Sparring Gear, I play my Sparring Gear, you Bashing Shield me, but if I have this set, I still have Tough 3, and like, so you didn't play a weapon because you played your Bashing Shield with a Reckless Charge or a Supercharge, and I'm talking about versus aggro matchups here. This card can be very good. And of course, Sabotage Armaments is going to be a 3 of in any blue deck I play all the way till Wave 5. That's coming out April 2020, by the way, and very excited for that. But yeah, I don't see myself ever going to 2 of this card unless like every other card in my deck is so important and so good that I sincerely cannot fit this into my 40 cards or 42 cards as I like to play in some decks. This one's 40 though, by the way. So that's it for the secret actions. Step forward was a consideration, but I'll talk about step forward a little bit more later. And next up, to round out the rest of the actions, we have for our star card, we're going to play Universal Network Access and Work Overtime. So I'm showing these cards together because in conjunction, you want to see at least one of them, maybe even 2 of them throughout the game. Well, you want to see them as often as possible. I'll take that back. So the fact that you're scrapping cards out your hand with the base and the spaceship's effects, not the base, excuse me, the tank and the spaceship a lot throughout the game, mostly the spaceship. The one that scraps upgrades is probably the one I'll be looking to use the most. If it comes up that I can use the tank's effect to burn somebody for one that it's relevant, they're not hitting for big numbers and they're really defending more than they're doing their onslaught offensive attack. So this deck's offensive power is very low, but it's very controlling with the right damage is very high. So, you know, in terms of that, it's very good. So yeah, scrapping cards out of your hand to do those effects, you need to be able to refill your hand. So what I was talking about earlier in conjunction with Security Checkpoint. So if you have one of these cards in your hand or even both or whatever, let's say you have you have 2 important upgrades in your hand, like an Energon Axe and a Laser Cutlass. And spoiler alert, you have an Energon Axe and a Laser Cutlass in your hand. Well, you can only play one of them. Let's say it's early game and none of your characters are damaged. So it's like, well, all right, so I'm going to play the Laser Cutlass. And you also have Work Overtime in your hand. So I play the Laser Cutlass and then use Security Checkpoint your opponent while they still have 4 or whatever cards in their hand, and hopefully get value out of that. Yes, you lost your Energon Axe, but you do have your Work Overtime to be able to build your hand back up. Hopefully draw into some of your other cards here. We got when we get to the upgrades we'll talk about. So I'm not really a big interaction, but it's just something I thought about. I was like, oh, okay, I can because a lot of times with most other decks, I always want, because I'm not playing Work Overtime or I'm not playing this draw 3 card, I always want to try to get as many upgrades out of my hand as possible and plan for, like I've always said in the past, when my big character attacks the Security Checkpoint that turn. Because again, if they Bashing Shield your best character, if they Bashing Shield on the turn that your best character attacked, well, then they can't play a grenade launcher or a bigger, upgrade or whatever, and you won't take as much damage, at least at that point. I mean, it really depends on the character as well, but that's the idea behind it. It's given me very high success in the past, and up till now, actually. So, yeah, so 3 Work Overtime, 3 Universal Network Access, of course, is my star card of choice. This was Heroic Resolve, but Heroic Resolve is actually in the side deck now, and we'll talk about the side deck here in a little bit. So, refilling your hand is nice after you burn for, or even if, let's say, you only have a couple of cards in your hand, and you want to use Captain Omega Supreme's effect that turn, you can use this Work Overtime. Now, so a little bit of controversy within myself that I've had some issues figuring out was if I really want to play System Reboot over Work Overtime. Now, the thing with System Reboot, yes, it digs you 4 cards faster, or deeper rather, to get rid of your, to be able to combine, the faster you're able to combine, the better. But the 4 cards that you need to probably see like 2 of them for it to really be anything. And because it's not a white-green, thank God, it is from the first set. There were no greens then anyway. But it's really, I don't think it's really that serious thing. You just play a normal game until they let them naturally, deck out. If they're playing a whole bunch of tough, good. Attack their tough character as much as possible so they can mill as much as possible. Attack the guy with the sparring gear that they put on that they really don't need to versus another blue deck, especially like this one. Attack the guy with the sparring gear as often as possible to make them mill 4 cards in general. That's your System Reboot in a way, for lack of better words. That 4 cards that they dig, and then plus if they hit a white, of course they're going to flip even more. But that just goes without saying it anyway. But yeah, that's the idea behind it. And so System Reboot probably could potentially be a side deck card for decks like the Springer deck to ruin their hand, like when they have 6 cards in hand and they're going to draw to 7, so they're going to flip to bot mode and be able to trigger its effect to play an action and upgrade, an extra action and upgrade, and or even Shockwave, of course, when Shockwave is stripping your hand while they're sitting pretty with their 4 or 5 cards in hand, being able to reboot them and diminish all of their future plans and then drawing 4 cards is always nice as well. But again, like I said, I think it's more of a side deck card. I think I'd rather have Work Overtime in the main deck. The couple of games that I've played with this deck so far, System Reboots has never seemed to work out when I wanted it to, and only against those 2 decks I mentioned prior a couple seconds ago, only 2 decks I really want Reboot against. And plus it's another white, so I'm really diluting my flips. I'm already playing like 5 whites in here, so I can't play both. Like I can't. I mean, obviously, I need to play this because it's my star card, but that's just where I'm at right now. System reboot is potentially better, but right now, I like work overtime and what it allows for the deck and its pluses. Next up, that's it for my actions. The actions are 21 actions. For the upgrades, of course, we're going to start with the most obvious one, double blue, handheld blaster. Will never equip it in this deck. You guys know how I always talk about improvised shield and handheld blaster when they come up. I will never equip this card to my character. There's not enough, if any, there's no actually black icons in this deck. There are no orange icons in this deck at all either. So I will never equip this card to try to flip an additional blue or additional whatever to try to get whatever. This card will forever be, even if it's the one card I have in my hand, I won't even keep it in my hand, or I won't even play it so Shockwave doesn't take it. It just doesn't make sense. There's no reason to equip this card. So I will always, just let it get scrapped, or I will use this obviously for a green icon. That's the best utilization for it. You can also, what's nice about this deck is, of course, get rid of this card for your tank and your spaceships effect to scrap 2 cards from your hand and deal 1 damage to an enemy or scrap an enemy upgrade. So double blue there. And for my weapons, or the rest of my weapons, handheld blaster, your weapon, my bad. We got 2 of all of these. So some of these are 3 of, some of these are 2 of, some of these were 1 ofs at one point. But my latest iteration of the deck is going to test 2 of each. So we got 2 armor hovercraft, 2 sturdy javelin to complete the rest of the range package. So we got 7 range package range cards total in the deck. And then we have for our Pierce cards, we have 2 laser cutlass and 2 energon axe. Laser cutlass was 3 at one point in time, but then I cut it down to 2 because I only have 2 characters that are 7 or lower. So but at the same time, I wanted to play 3 because I really want to have one when I combine. This is the best case scenario card to have when you combine into Captain Omega Supreme, period. This card gives you the highest outburst of attack, or excuse me, Pierce rather. So you get 3 attack and 2 Pierce here. You get 1 attack. I guess they technically good and they're both in their own rights. But here, you, especially against blue decks, you're able to have 8 attack, Pierce 7. 8 Pierce 7. Remember, Omega Supreme has 7 attack and Pierce 4 from the beginning, and then this Laser Cutlass is going to give Pierce 3. If you keep this on, now the way that you get this on Omega Supreme is by simply having this equipped it to your one of your 2 level 7 or lower, or level 7 Omega Supreme pieces before you combine. Once you combine, the ruling is you're able to keep whatever upgrades are on that character. So, for example, even if you had a sturdy armor, which is only be able to equip it to specialist, if I had that on the base and then I combined, I could keep that and then still have that extra +1 defense from ranged characters. So that's something to keep in mind, and I think it's very valuable. Like I said, 8 Pierce 7 is ridiculous against Superion, against other matchups, other blue matchups. You're coming in for 7 all the time, and then especially if you have your armor and stuff when they're hitting you back, you're not taking as much as they are, and you could potentially win the race for victory. And then, of course, Energon Axe is always great. So you want one of these. If you don't have a Cutlass on one of your characters before you combine, you can at least have this card on afterwards. Energon Axe, very powerful card. Love this card. Of course, you have to have damage on you. You'll definitely be damaged by the time you go into Omega Supreme. And that'll boast Omega Supreme to have 10 attacks, Pierce 6. 10 Pierce 6 coming at you. Sounds pretty good to me. I'll keep it. And that works. Even if they sabotage armaments and you still are getting in for Pierce 4. So you're getting in for a bigger they are every single turn. And I really like that card, or this deck as a whole. And then, of course, we got our beloved range package. We got only 2 armor hovercraft and 2 sturdy javelin. I can see myself side decking a 3rd hovercraft. I can see myself taking out a laser cutlass, despite of the great things I've said about it, because I love the range package so much. And it just depends on kind of how the meta shapes out. That's what your side deck is for too, though. So maybe my side deck is for rather 2 as well. So I can potentially side deck a 3rd one for wider decks. I'm only playing 2 sturdy javelin, and again, most of these, the reason why it's a whole bunch of 2 ofs is space. Space is an issue for this deck. The card that I'm about to show you next is a card I really want to see in my opening hand. Now, playing 42 takes the percentage down. It's never an argument that 40 is better than 42, but for me, I know play skill will overcome the fact that I'm playing another 2 cards, because I know what I'm doing most of the time. And I'm not really worried about extra. I will admit, a lot of times it's an error in deck building and not knowing exactly what I want to cut, and that's what happens when you're on your own. You don't have a team or anything to talk about these type of things with and potentially help you with whatever. And I'm not tripping. I'm not complaining. It's all good. But that's just how it's been since the beginning. You guys know I've been on my own, and that's what it is. So sometimes I'll just play 42 because I feel like it spreads out my, I don't want to get into that. It's a thing from Yu-Gi-Oh! And I'm not going to talk about it. I'm not worried about the math. I don't care about the math. I've been on, I've had clear success with 42, so I'm just going to leave it at that. My Shockwave deck was 42 that I got 3rd place with at the Energon Invitational. So I'm going to leave that at that. But yeah, so that's my upgrades and my weapons, rather. I got, all these great cards. So hopefully you can, like I said, the best case scenario is probably to have Laser Cutlass or maybe Energon Axe, and I'll go from there. Next up for our upgrades, we have 3 extra padding. So total, the 2 cards I haven't showed you yet, I showed you so far 5 white cards. So 5 white icon cards, the 2 sturdy javelin and 3 work overtime. So this card, okay, well, excuse me, I said that wrong. So I have 7 cards total that aren't blue. The other 33 cards are all blue, always flipping for a high amount of defense. You really need that high amount of defense to have a decent amount of health on Omega Supreme when you finally combine. So this card is not a card I really like in too many decks. I know Richard Wyatt made it work in Jetfire, so I can see that in the 2 white deck being very good, although Disarm is going to be a thing. And then at the same time, Disarm's not that good against this probably, because like if they're not killing your Jetfire or putting them super far ahead, then they can just play all 3 again next turn, and then you need to have another Disarm. So I like this card in this deck mainly because it's on color, and it sparring gear is good, but like I said, I really need to defend well while in that early to mid game. And that's really all there is to it. You can kind of spread these out on each of your characters. If you don't have this utility I'm going to be showing here in a second, you can put 1 on each of your characters. So if you have all 3 in your hand, you can play 1 on each character. You probably won't do that, but just to be funny, you could. But this card is just, I think, good in certain decks. I tried it like an Octone. I didn't like it in Octone. So, yeah. So sparring gear and or this card is very good. For now, I like this card, and to be able to get 1 or 2 on the base, and we'll get more into that in a second. So, card I've been talking about this entire time, one of the biggest ways to make this deck work and to get this deck functioning in a decent way is having your opponent attack into your base with Bravery. So, we had other considerations for this deck in the forms of course I can't find them. Where are they? They were here. I swear they were here. Alright, so the other consideration for this deck was, in my first version I did have Step Forward, in my second or third version I had Point Position. So Step Forward is a secret action, a new secret action that I really like and I need to give more focus to, because it's a very powerful effect, being able to just give one of your characters Brave out of nowhere. You set this card, and when your opponent declares an attack, they choose their attacker and tap it to attack. You flip this card then and give one of your characters Brave. Of course, you want to give that to your base, because he's the one that if it was left up to you, this is the character card that you want to be attacked into the most, because it will keep scrapping 2 cards from the top of their deck and then deal that free 2 damage Plasma Burst effect back to the attacker every single time. So Step Forward was a consideration, but it's only a one-time use, and you really need to, like, at first I think my first build was 3 Point Position and 2 Step Forward, but I'm already having, I feel like I definitely need one of these 3 cards, whether Point Position or Bravery. So I'd rather have 3 dead cards in my deck once I combine than these 5. So the Step Forward just came out ultimately for space, and it was one of the easier cards to cut out. And so Point Position was interesting because, so it's either you play Bravery, it gives your character your base, because you're not going to put it on any other character most likely. It gives your base Brave, whether he's tapped or untapped. Point Position is a black-blue icon card new in the War for Salvation Siege 2. That gives a character the equipped character Brave while tapped. So a lot of times, of course, base will be the first guy you attack with. Then when you attack with your tank or spaceship, they still have to attack into the base as long as Point Position is on the field. So what makes these cards even more powerful potentially is because cards like Smelt are going out of favor for cards like Reprocess. When this card gets attacked, you're going to take damage. If they do reprocess the Bravery off of the base, then you'll get to heal too. It's not the biggest deal, but it is relevant because he'll be the one that you want to be taking the damage. And if he can soak up 2 to 3 to 4 attacks, you're golden. Now, probably against aggro decks, he's probably only going to be able to soak up 2 attacks, maybe 3. Against slower blue decks, he might be able to soak up a lot of attacks and get you to be able to get to Omega Supreme with a decent amount of health, and that's very important and very good. So what I ended up doing was, like I said, I have a video to post that shows me playing Point Position, and it was against the 2-eye Jetfire. But the thing is, I don't think it was a big deal in that match. But at the same time, so when we stood, I didn't like the fact that when the wheel turn came and we stood, when they get a chance to attack whatever character they want, that they could go after my spaceship or my tank. I want them to still have to go at my base even when we're stood back up on the wheel turn is what it's called. So Bravery was the best option for that. I am trading the fact that, the Point Position has a black icon, so when I do randomly flip it on offense, I get that random 1 pierce. But this deck isn't focused on black, so I'm not really, it's cool, when they flip it on Mega Supreme's attack as well, but I don't think that extra 1 pierce is going to do that much. Pierce 4 is already plenty, not plenty, but a lot. You can never have enough pierce, right? But yeah, so Bravery is the card of choice that I decided to play in this deck. Like I said, it's 40 cards, because I really would like to try to see this card early. At all costs. I have 8 draw cards in here. I showed you guys 6 of them, and let's go ahead and show you the last 2 cards in the deck to round out the 8 draw cards. Pocket Processor. So this card's a very simple one. This card is an easy swap out for the Bravery. Once you're finally combined, you easily just grab this off of your defensive or offensive flip, play this in place of Bravery, and now you have a solid, consistent draw engine to be able to fill your hand for Omega Supreme's effect and scrap Galaxy Prime's energy packs. So yeah, or whoever, scrap anybody, like scrapping all their upgrades, especially like late game, or that mid/late game when they have their character just about set up, or Voltron is what it's called now. Yeah, scrapping all their upgrades really sets them back. Disarm already set them back enough, but this Omega Supreme gets rid of them. So I think that's very cool. And like I said, I think this deck has promise, especially as a rogue deck. I don't think it'll be a top deck. I would hope it'd be a top deck, to be honest with you. I like this deck a lot, and I keep working on it and going through all these iterations, and I think this is the best version that I have come up with personally. So if you guys like it, definitely give it a try. Before we go, though, I'm going to talk about the side deck for a second. Now, the side deck's very interchangeable. You can add another Sturdy Javelin, another Armed Hovercraft when you're playing against bugs or when you play against any other wide aggro deck, because that direct damage is definitely very important. But, of course, your side deck character, unfortunately, you're stuck with the 3 characters that you start with. So similar to like Sentinels and a couple of other decks that I can't, like Triptychon, you're not able in Metroplex. Okay, I guess there's a couple. You're not able to side deck into a character, because once you take out this guy for a private turbo board, then you won't be able to combine, because you need that, because you won't be able to combine, rather, because you don't have all 3, in the game. So even if one of these are KO'd and they still deck out, this one still comes back and combines to the rest and makes Omega Supreme. So you have your 3 star cards. I do have another star card in the side deck. You guys can probably guess what it is. And I think that's really all there is to say about that. So yeah, I mean, you could. I think if I were to take this to a tournament, I would be funny and side deck the other Omega Supreme, just because I could, and like I would never probably side it in, but you could do that. So there's that. Well, would I side it? Nah, probably not. Okay, I'm getting these stupid ideas. Anyway, so starting out with the side deck, we have 3 Heroic Resolve. Now this card is so good. 9 double blues in your deck. This is like, once they finally revealed this card in the, I don't know who got revealed first, whether this was revealed first and then Omega Supreme, but once they were finally both, in fruition together, seeing this card to be able to play automatically and give you 9 double blues in your deck for some serious survivability in the early and mid game, which is what you want, seemed very enticing. But I noticed that I needed more draw power in the deck, so that's why I chose Universal Network Access, Universal Network Access, UNA, over Heroic Resolve in the main deck. This card will come in versus aggressive decks, against decks that have a lot of Pierce. I'm just going to skip all the way to the end, being Omega Supreme and getting to those last couple turns, because one thing I will say, side note, I've noticed that no matter how cool your deck is, Shockwave, Sentinels, Galaxy Optimus, Jetfire, most of the time I've noticed that most games come down to one turn. They come down to one turn where you and your opponent have this one crucial turn where you need to make the most correct play. You have room for misplays throughout the game, but there's like this one turn that's very crucial. And what I'm getting at is the fact that most games are going to come down to the race against our last characters on the field. And it's like, okay, putting this, like, no game should be a landslide. So when you do get to that point where you're about to potentially lose that, race of damage and you need one more turn, that's where Heroic Resolve comes in. Heroic Resolve is really nice to be able to set. Your opponent thinks they got you beat. You have 3 health left. Their guy has Pierce 3. They have an Energon Axe, and all they need to do is flip a black. So they attack with their character, hit the Pierce 3. You flip Heroic Resolve, and you live by 1, and you keep the character, and then this goes into your KO pile, not back into your deck, so this does not get reshuffled. So keep that in mind. It only doesn't get reshuffled after you activate the effect. So saying all that, if you don't know exactly what the effect is now, so what you're able to do is set it as a secret action, of course. And then one of your Autobots would take enough attack damage to be KO'd. You flip this card, and then, like I said, it lives with 1 health pretty much, and then this card goes in your KO area. So one thing that's important to note is attack damage. So if you only have 2 more damage on you and your opponent has a Sturdy Javelin, you just lose. There's nothing you can do about it. If you have 1 more damage, let's say you have 2 of these in your hand and you live the first time with this and your opponent's salty, they're like, damn it, you get in and you still need another turn because you're that behind and you need another turn to get that Pierce 4 in for victory. But the next turn, they play Zap or they play Underhanded Tactics. Direct damage, unfortunately, is the bane of this card, and being able to survive to push for that extra turn. But overall, this card is very good. I think this will be good, especially if you have the base and Bravery combo. When your Bravery is taking a whole bunch of hits and he's on his last leg, he only has 1 health left. If your opponent doesn't have direct damage and they go attack into this guy again, you can have this card, flip it, they live with that same 1 health again, and then they have to attack into it again, which can save you and buy you some time to get some things going with the rest of your characters and progress your turns. So 3 Heroic Resolve. Next up, we have 3 Hijack. This is a card I hyped up a lot going into the Energon Invitational, and I did not side deck it. Don't ask me why. I meant to side deck this card at the EI, but I don't think I ran into any matchups that I really wish I had it, but especially with the combo deck, especially with Springer still making a splash. If multi-mission gear wasn't banned before the EI, we could have definitely expected a lot more Daring Escapes at the event. Probably actually even forced to main deck this card, because this will at least just keep them off of doing their crazy combo plays, and you'll be able to draw a whole bunch more cards, thus drawing multiple copies of this potentially, thus drawing, you know, other outs to stop them from what they're doing and potentially slow them down. But of course, that would have been a shit show, and I'm glad that WTC took some action to slow it down at least. But alas, the deck is still very viable, and shout out to Blaine, who got top 4 with Insecticons at Gen Con this year. Shout out to him. He's been doing very well with the deck. So I think this card is going to be a mainstay in side decks going forward. The disruption is just really nice to be able to set your opponent back. And like I said, you find more outs for your deck and try to hold them off from their onslaught of drawing cards. So 3 of that. Next up, we got 3 War of Attrition. Now, this is a flex spot. Doesn't have to be in here, but the theory is I was put onto this card by multiple players throughout the Energon Invitational weekend. So shout out to all those players. Thing with a War of Attrition is, especially against slower decks, it's very easy to accumulate these 3. You could probably do it at least twice per game. And being able to deal 3, which is that direct damage that you know I love, and healing 3 off of yourself when you play all 3 is very nice. So not too much more to say about this. Again, you won't probably, not too much more to say about this. Did I say it right? You probably won't put this again, of course, ever against an aggressive deck, but against very slow decks, being able to get that direct damage on them and then heal 3 is very nice. And I think this card's going to see a lot more play. Richard Wyatt put this card on the map as well with his 8-1 finish, side decking this card as well. So this card may make a space into some main decks. So definitely a card to look out for. And then last but not least, we have one stable cover. This was 3 of in my side deck. This was a 3 of, excuse me, in my side deck at first, but it's now down to a 1 of. It could probably be something else. I don't know how serious it is to stop somebody's Pierce. I value this card very high as well going into the EI. I wish that these were 2 hijacks in my side deck for Shockwave versus this card, but this card's still very good. So the meta does move more towards Pierce, which it probably is because blue decks are just, well, I'll take that back. You know what? Shout out to Jake for winning the PPG with the Airstrike Patrol, Airstrike General deck. But the thing is, I mean, if Pierce ever becomes a thing, this will be an immediate 2 to 3 of side deck card. This card is a secret action that has a black icon, and you reveal it when one of your characters defends. It gets +1 defense, and then any Pierce that your opponent's character have is nullified for the turn. So if they had 4 Pierce 4 from the bigger they are, they're just 4. So if you're blocking that 4, you take nothing for that turn and going from there. So definitely a card to be looking out for as a potential side deck card moving forward. And that's going to do it for this deck profile. So I appreciate you guys all being here. It's been a ride, but it's not over. I do have 1, maybe 2 more videos to post before the year is out. But moving into 2020 is going to be a big year. More things happening, more tournaments, more players joining, hopefully. And watching the growth of the game is going to be a beautiful thing because I'll be here for it. And to, you know, make more friends throughout the way, along the way, rather, and get my traveling in and all that good stuff. So very excited for all that. I got a giveaway coming up that I'm going to post actually also before the end of the year that'll ride all the way into the new year. And the only thing you have to do is subscribe. Subscribing to the channel is going to be the #1 thing that you need to do in order to enter these giveaways. It's going to well, I think it's going to be funny, the idea that I have in my head to present my little giveaway. But so be looking forward to that coming up soon. And like I said, subscribing to the channel will definitely help me out. I very much appreciate it. Like this video if you like the content, and check out my other videos on my channel as well, man. You know, got a lot of cool content, a lot of cool guys play testing and things like that. I got an interview series I want to do coming up. I have a series called the Champ Camp. You heard that right. The Champ Camp coming up soon, where I talk to all the champions, try to get them in pretty much, I guess you can say, it's my own podcast. I've never had a podcast. Personally, I've always wanted to do one. So it'll be like my little maybe 30 or so minute podcast I'm going to start doing at least once a week, once every other week with the other champions in this game and talk to them about various topics and go from there. And yeah. So be looking out for my first one coming up sometime soon. Not this week. Maybe I'm hoping next week. Try to schedule with the homie, the Energon Invitational winner, Dan Arnold. So from Back to Sigma. So shout out to him. I hope you guys like the Captain Omega Supreme deck profile. And I'm going to get up out of here. You guys have a great day and or great night. Whenever you're catching this video, you know what it is. This is your homie S. Dot of DefTF heading out. Peace.